The key phrase here is minimum income guarantee, and what this actually means is that unlike the universal basic income that most economists talk about, this is not universal, neither is it a basic minimum income for everybody. What it means is that it's actually a progressive scheme where there would be a certain threshold for minimum income that would be decided and fixed, and those that fall below that threshold at varying degrees will be compensated with income transfers to ensure that there is a basic minimum income support for every poor household in the country. So this is for the poor households, and we could always indulge in a discussion on what poor households mean, what percentage of households they are, and all of that. And all of those details will be announced and revealed in the manifesto that will be announced very shortly. But this has been a topic that we've been discussing and engaging with various stakeholders, incling economists from all over the world.
One minute, Praveen. When you say
a certain scheme,
sure. When you say progressive minimum income scheme, can you explain that in a bit more detail? For example, are you saying that different households would get different amounts, and of course these are going to be directly transferred as is mentioned in the Congress statement as well?
Correct. See, like I said, the details, all of the details would be announced in the manifesto. All I'm pointing out to this is a structural framework on how we are thinking about this. Right? So the universal basic income, since you refer to it, as most people understand, is A, it is universal, which means everybody gets it, including the richest 1%, and B, it's a standard amount for everybody. Now, we will adapt that to the conditions here, which is, so number one, it's not universal, it will be aimed at only the poor households, and B, it will not be the same amount for everybody. It will depend on how poor each household is. So in that sense, it is progressive in nature.
Progressive in respect to what? Is there a standard figure which you have in mind from where the amount which will be transferred to each household will be derived?
Yes, see, there are various frameworks, economic frameworks that we're thinking about, including the average per capita income, what's the minimum standard of living, what about inflation, index to inflation, all of that. But let us assume that X amount of rupees per year is the threshold minimum income that is needed for every Indian household in this country. Let's assume my income is just 50% of that, and your income is 70% of that. Then the gap between that minimum income is different for both of us. So the income guarantee scheme would ensure that all of us are at the basic minimum income threshold.
And how will you determine who should be the recipient for this? So will this be determined based on annual income? Is there a ballpark sort of idea? Because I know, Praveen, you are a person who works with statistics. Is there an idea you have in mind on what percentage of the population you're covering when you're saying this is for the poor? How many people is this?
Yes, so like I said again, all of those details will be worked out. But see, it's important to think about this in terms of, I think your larger question is how would we know or how would we target? And I think it's a very valid question. What we do know is that we today have enough data and information about households in the country, but through which we can make objective decisions. I'll just give you a simple example. Just coincidentally today, the former Chief Economic Advisor of India, Dr. Arvind Subramanian, and two other co-authors have published a piece in the Business Standard that actually talks about, that gives various scenarios of how this could work. And they've also highlighted how using the SECC, the socioeconomic census data, one could actually come and arrive at and target households based on income levels. That is one framework, but I'm just citing that as an example. So today it is possible to be able to target and identify households, and it's much easier today than it was even say 5 years ago or 10 years ago.
Okay. The other big question, Praveen, is as a country, as an economy, can India afford a scheme like this? Would it be looked as a huge socialist scheme? And of course, promises are made before an election. But we have to see if they are implementable. And do you think they are implementable?
No. I think we should stay away from the labels of isms, socialism and capitalism and all of that. This is an economic idea that has been widely discussed and debated all over the world, including in India over the last 2 years. The chief economic advisor then in 2017, Dr. Arvind Subramanian, had an entire chapter on this in the economic survey. So it's not an idea that is, that could be labeled as one of the isms. What it means is that it recognizes some very fundamental harsh truths about today's society. A, income inequality is widening at an alarming rate. B, minimum income support, incomes have become very, very volatile for people. C, economic growth does not necessarily mean job-full growth, which means there are income-less growth for people. D, returns to capital are much higher than returns to labor, as we call it in economics. Hence, all of these are well-recognized facts in today's world by all economists. So it's not some electoral promise or whatever you may call it. There's been a lot of thought behind this, and I think one of the contexts in which the announcement was made today was the Congress president was in Chhattisgarh for giving out the loan waiver certificates, and it's a natural progression because all of you would constantly ask, what after loan waiver? Loan waiver is just a balm, a soothing balm. So he actually thought it was prudent to actually make this announcement today, which is a natural next step to how we're going to think about this idea of no Indian left behind, borrowing from Barack Obama's No Child Left Behind.
Yeah, the first one is what happens to the subsidies? Does this minimum income guarantee scheme subsume, existing subsidies? And secondly, would you start implementing this as a pilot project in the states where the Congress is in power to let us see how it works?
Yeah, like I said, the details will be in the manifesto, but I think Aditi Fadnis's larger question is how would this be funded? So this would be funded in a combination of things. We've thought through this. We've thought through a combination of increased revenues, rationalization of expenditure, as well as, I think, don't forget, just income in the hands of the poor automatically also leads to a consumption boost to the economy. So there is a proper economic framework through which we can think about this and which we have. So all of the details in terms of how this would be funded would be in the manifesto. The second question about doing a pilot, I think a pilot at this point, the manifesto is expected to be announced in the next few days or weeks. So I'm not so sure we would wait for a pilot in any of the states before we actually announce, because I don't believe we have that time.
Every version of these kind of schemes come with a paring down of subsidies. It just seems a natural progression.
Sure. I do first want to make it clear that the chairman of the manifesto committee and the person who I'm working with very closely on this is the former finance minister, Mr. P. Chidambaram. So I think it is reasonable to assume that Mr. Chidambaram knows a little bit about India's finances and the schemes and how we need to fund this and keep fiscal prudence in check. I think we also need to think about this in a much more nuanced manner. I think it is not just simply as about we dropping one and bringing in a new one and all of those. I think first this is income support, then there is cash versus kind types of schemes, then you have to account for transition, you have to account for a variety of such things. So I think it is important to go through the nuance, and I can assure all of you at this point in time that all these details are being thought through and worked upon by some of the finest experts in the country.
Is there any kind of figure you can share with us as a percentage of GDP or any estimate so far?
No. Okay. I can't share anything with you right now. But see, I think I would urge you to read Dr. Arvind Subramanian's piece just today, about what he calls a quasi-universal income. So there are various scenarios there. Should it be 0.5% of GDP? Should it be 1% of GDP? Should it be 1.5% of GDP? Should it be 2% of GDP? He actually assigns different scenarios. So I think those are all kind of valuable inputs into our thought process before we finalize and settle on something. You would appreciate that we have to first kind of settle on how many households are we targeting, what is the amount, where can we fund it, keeping fiscal prudence in check, and that will determine a lot of the questions about what would it mean as a percentage of GDP.
Now, I have read that piece, and he talks about an annual transfer of 18,000 rupees a year, which to 75% of the rural population, which would cost about 2.64 lakh crore rupees. But then again, he's talking about farmers. When you talk about an income guarantee scheme for the poor, you're going beyond rural areas, you're going to urban areas as well. But anyway, let me come to the politics of it. And Mr. Narayanan, I think we should get into that, because I think it's no coincidence that this comes in the same week as the budget is expected to be announced. People were saying that there would be some sort of farm transfer scheme announced in the budget. Has Rahul Gandhi timed this to sort of steal the thunder? The question is, how will you ensure that you actually follow through? If you don't come to power in 2019, will you implement this in the states where you are governing?
No, see, I mean, again, I want to reiterate, this is an idea that has been thought through and has been announced by the Congress president. So we're obviously extremely serious about this. This was not one of those election promises that I think the BJP president himself called, I forget that Hindi term, I think Jumla or something, that he had used for that 15 lakh promise. So it's certainly not that. And I'm sitting here and giving you the framework and the process by which we're thinking through this. I think we have to step back and realize, what does this tell us? This is a recognition of the fact that perhaps what is needed the most after May 2019 for this country is healing of the economy and healing of society, for sure. But healing of the economy. Economic issues are paramount. The 2019 election will be about jobs, or lack of it, and it will be about rural distress, and it will be about lack of income growth. And that is really why we've spent a lot of time working through an idea and the details of it, and we chose to announce it today.